Okay, so we're going to be live on Facebook. Perfect. All right, perfect. Hello, everyone who's watching on Facebook or who is going to be joining us here in a little bit. I am Joe Russo. I'm the CEO of the Palm Beach Tech Association, and I'm here with Michael Fowler and Jason Warnke. Michael is with the very well-known company, if you live in Florida, known as Florida Power and Light. If you have bought electricity, you probably have bought it from them. And then Jason Warnke, who is the global digital enterprise lead for Accenture. Together, these two gentlemen lead enterprise level IT teams in tackling a variety of challenges on an everyday basis. Some of the things that these guys do, you might not always hear about, but some of the work that they do affects our daily lives. And respectfully, they actually lead two of Florida's largest tech association. Michael is my chair of our board of directors here at Palm Beach Tech, and Jason is the chair of Tampa Bay Tech. And for everybody who's watching in, I do have a cup of Joe myself. I hope everybody else has a cup of coffee. So please, if you're watching, take a minute, grab a cup of Joe, grab a coffee, enjoy the conversation we're going to be having here today. With that, would love to have Michael and Jason, if you guys want to introduce yourselves and just briefly, and then we can dive into the conversation a little bit from there.
I'll let Jason go first.
Okay, thanks, Michael. As Michael's, or as Joe stated, I both am part of Accenture's IT organization. For those of you that might not be familiar with Accenture, we're a rather large global organization of 500,000 people. I happen to work in the IT shop inside of Accenture's IT organization and responsible for all of our collaboration and enterprise applications, those applications that our enterprise functions use to run Accenture day in, day out. As Joe also mentioned, I'm the chair of Tampa Bay Tech, have been involved with this fantastic organization for years here in Tampa Bay as a mechanism to develop deeper relationships with my peers in Tampa Bay. And a little known fact, Michael and I go way back as he was my client back in the day when I was in our utilities practice, working together in many instances in the past. So it's kind of a neat connection here that Michael chairs the Palm Beach Tech Association and I chair the Tampa Bay Tech Association. And we're both part of internal IT at our respective organizations. It's pretty cool. So Michael, with that, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Jason. And it's only been like 2 years you've been friends, right?
Oh, yeah. Just 2 years.
So I have the application team here at FPL that supports a lot of our customer-facing functions. And so if you've called one of our call centers, if you've had power out, if you've used our website, a lot of the technology that you're tapping into is supported by my team. And it's a very exciting place to work. And we try to do that flawlessly every day for our customers. And just like Jason, I've been involved with Palm Beach Tech now for, I think 3 or 4 years. Yes, Joe? And so time flies when you're having fun. And, I think it's been an amazing experience with Palm Beach Tech because I feel like it gives more opportunities to local tech talent. And that's been exciting to see grow over the last couple of years.
Awesome. And I think it's been about that long, about 4 years or so. We've known each other, I think, about that long, but both of you guys have been, engaged and members of your community, I think, in a lot of ways beyond that. I think that's what makes you both really good leaders is you don't look at just, how do I take an impact internally, but, how do I take an impact beyond that? Learn from those around me and try and employ a variety of those changes across the entire technology team. So, and with us here on the call today, we also have a few members of our team, and we're going to be having some other folks join us here. Nikki, if you're joining in, I want to make sure everybody has the proper Zoom links for those who are trying to hop in and be a part of the conversation today. So if you could just double check that for me and make sure that all the links and the passwords there are right. Just so we can make sure that we have a good conversation. And we are streaming this live, of course, on the Palm Beach Tech and the Tampa Bay Tech Facebook pages today. So for anybody who's watching in later, you're probably finding us on either one of those spots. So thank you again for everybody. With that, I would love to just start the conversation off briefly and ask Michael and Jason, what's it been like over the last couple months for you? How have you been personally? How have you been professionally? How have things kind of changed and altered in aspects of your life? And then, of course, what's the business perspective to all of that?
I think on a personal level, I followed Jason's lead. I got a Peloton right before COVID hit. And thankfully I did, and they dropped it off the door, I think days before the lockdown went into place. And so on a personal level, my fitness level has definitely gone up during COVID, which was good, because for the most part we've been 100% virtual since the middle of March.
Yes, and so as Michael referred to, that thing that's kept me in, I would say it's important to sort of have mind and body coverage, if you will, or an approach to make sure that you're staying both physically fit but also mentally fit as you deal with the circumstance at hand at the moment. But I would say, as an organization that is highly distributed anyway, this sort of concept of working, in a very remote way, maybe not 100% remote as we are right now, but a very remote and distributed way, is something that our population at Accenture has been very used to for quite some time. So, I do actually, when I'm not on the road traveling to different places, I'm most of my time here in my home office versus the office that we have in Tampa Bay for Accenture. And then when people are on the road, they're used to jumping on to a Microsoft Teams call, starting video and doing this chat and working that way on the go. So in terms of that transition, that aspect of it, a lot of companies, that was a brand new thing that they had to get used to. We had finished our massive move from Skype for Business to Teams at the start of the calendar year. And we, that was bedded down for us before we, got into this current circumstance. So that part of the change wasn't the tough part. The tough part for our people was, doing this exclusively. The only way that we were going to meet was this way. And so everything from design thinking and whiteboarding and those sorts of things, now completely virtual, what was a big shift. And it's something that everyone is learning. Just when they thought they were an expert on how to do this, a few curveballs got thrown in that they weren't, anticipating. And so I think that has been the big shift. But, I like how Michael started at first with how are you doing personally and how are you sort of keeping some normalcy in your life? For me, it's all around, how I'm, mind, body, sort of connection, and then sort of work layers on top of that, of course. So hopefully that helps.
And I must add, you were the only person brave enough of the three of us to not have a virtual background, which I think goes back into the fact you're very prepared to work from home. It looks like you have a nice little architected background there. But, that was one thing before I hopped on the call today, was making sure my background, me and Michael are both kind of MacGyvering our home office setups right now.
Oh, I love it. And as a huge Office fan, I do love your background. I have to say.
Yeah, there's some good ones. This is actually a video one that I got. And there's obviously the non-video ones that are out there pretty prevalent. So both of your teams, I mean, Jason, Accenture is a global company. You both have these work from home or, somewhat virtual type of nature to your business. I know, Michael, you have multiple offices that you cover. Jason, you have teams and people all over. So more or less, you've been working, both of you, in some virtual nature for some time. Have you been able to really pivot that in the last couple months easily because of it? Or has it still been a little bit of a, hurdle here and there to try and overcome?
Our teams have always been spread out. We have quite a few offices. And while we don't have the big global footprint that Accenture has, we do have our team spread out across multiple offices. And we were never really good at the whole video thing. And so we would have conference calls, but it would be very one-dimensional. And I think what really has been the game changer with COVID is that we really have embraced things like Zoom and WebEx. And we have done better at virtual meeting places. We're 100% agile, and every 10 to 12 weeks we do a planning session for what we're going to do the next 10 or 12 weeks, and that was always done in a conference room with sticky notes. And so we've had to completely reinvent that process. And the teams actually came out, they think, with better tools and better ways to collaborate than they were during what I would say the physical world and the physical environment. I don't know if you've seen that, Jason, as well.
Yeah, I would say that the ingenuity of the teams as they sort of said, hey, this actually might work even better than the way we did it when we could physically meet together, I think has been something pretty inspiring to see. People always find a better way when the circumstance, forces them to. So, I sort of view this as the ultimate forcing function to any sort of transformation that's going to happen, because no longer is the excuse, oh, we'll figure that out over time. We can put that to the side. No, in the circumstance, all those things had to get solved with rapid pace and, with a mindset to, what, we're going to give it a shot, right? So the fail fast, fail often sort of thing. In the past, maybe we didn't have the same tolerance for not everything perfect. The tolerance levels, I think any of us that are in IT right now are starting to see a different tolerance level for, trying new solutions that might not have been the case before. So yeah, I think teams have found some pretty awesome ways. A fun way that came about the other day in Microsoft Teams, there isn't the concept of a countdown clock for a particular portion of the agenda. So like if you had a 30-minute agenda, you gave someone 5 minutes, there's no, countdown clock that shows you that your time is almost up. So someone came up with a super cool idea, referring back to backgrounds. They came up with 3 different backgrounds, one with a green light, one with a yellow light, and one with a red light. And that person changes their background. The call facilitator changes their background so that they're giving the signal to the speaker that, hey, you're getting close to time and now you're wrapped up. I mean, just things like that we would have never come up with had, we had other means to do meetings. And I think now teams are using that idea more and more. So, yeah.
You just gave Michael an idea for our next board meeting. So thanks for that.
Joe knows I'm a stickler for the time clock. One thing I've seen, Jason, is when we were in mixed mode where some people were together and some people were remote, there always was this bias toward the conversation was always stronger in the room. And so in some respects, I think going virtual has really leveled the playing field. And I think it's allowed people to participate in the events a little bit more equally, which I really like that piece of it.
In fact, I think I remember you saying that on your last discussion or last call like this. And I really, that makes so much sense. Whether you're talking about, you've got too large a group for everyone in a period of time to get their point of view out there, or you have the scenario of very dominant players in a meeting that always are taking the entire time. Tools like this enable everyone to have a voice. And just 2 simple mechanisms that we see is in Teams, you've got the concept of hand raising. So if you want to get a word in quickly, you can raise your hand. Or if you want to allow the conversation to flow, but you'd want to add a few points in just in the chat, anyone can go put stuff in the side chat as well. So you're absolutely right, where in a physical meeting, if you weren't one of those dominant players, if you didn't, if you weren't owning the room, it was hard to get a word in. Now these virtual tools allow you. So what we started to see this behavior even before this current crisis, where teams would even gather in person, but all join a Teams call. So the side chat could continue along with because that side chat sometimes is even more rich and valuable than what's getting said, verbally in that call.
I like that.
Yeah. And, it's unique for, I think, small teams, where it might just be a little bit different, but you guys are leading large teams, and maybe not directly in every case, but as a whole, the companies and the reports really pile up. I mean, for somebody who might not realize, like, what's the difference between running a large enterprise level team remote versus maybe a small team remote? What are those different challenges that you guys have to face on a regular basis that people that I lead a small team, I might not realize, for example, what some of those are?
I think on the really large teams, especially ones where we're implementing a big system for a client or whatever it is, we will more than likely have a global team. And so you have, with those larger teams, you've got the challenge of time zones. And so one of the things that we use to, again, level the playing field in a different way, maybe is a way to think about it, is the side chat of the meetings continues. It's persistent when the actual discussion stops. So if you didn't actually get to participate in that meeting, you could go, catch up on the side chat, and that can continue, and you elevate it back into a call if you need to. So that's one aspect. And then the other thing that people are starting to do more is record meetings. And just like in our consumer lives, we rely on, on demand instead of going to say, like, oh, my favorite show is on at 8 p.m. on Monday nights. You're just going to watch it on demand. The same concept will happen to meetings where, you just tune in and you can replay it. You can type a word and search, when Michael said transformation, boom, you go right to that point and you can see and hear the context that was being discussed. So no longer I have to be participating in that meeting for fear of missing out. And I'm multitasking on that call just because I don't want to make sure, I make sure I don't miss something. I think there's this, sorry, I went down another path, but the idea around, how large teams deal with things, I go right into the mindset of this meeting being an asynchronous, almost ever flowing thing, instead of what we've always thought of meetings in the past before we had tools like this as a meeting happened at 8 a.m. Monday morning. If you didn't make it, you didn't read the meeting minutes that came up via email, you sort of missed out on being able to participate. Now this meeting concept persists. I think it's a unique way for us to think about the future of this whole thing.
I'm not sure if we can ask questions from other members, Joseph, Michael, and Jason, so I don't want to derail the meeting.
Yeah, so I was actually going to lead to that in a second. For those that do have questions, if you want to do the hand raise feature in here, okay, and that'll allow me to see who to throw up to ask questions. But if you want to throw out your question now, you can.
So it's more for Jason and Michael in different roles. Jason, I'm a former Accenture alumni from many years ago, so love to be talking to Accenture people, and I have a lot of friends in that area. But I'm in your role more of as professional services. That's basically what you do in a large scale. The question is specific to you: do you have any PSA tool, a professional service automation tool that you guys use in Accenture that you have been using or you're thinking of using? Now that everything, as you say, is more global, and I mean, it's not only just more global, it's just everybody's like remote for the most part. So you have any tool besides just minutes, which are the traditional, and videos, etc. And for Michael, since you're more like internal, you have large projects in FPL. Do you have a PPM tool that you have or you're thinking of implementing to streamline not just the fact that people are chatting online? It could be like anywhere from a big portfolio project manager, SAP PPM, but do you have any tools that you guys are thinking of implementing to streamline the process now?
We use the Atlassian tools, and so we use both Jira and Confluence. And both of those, as Jason said, we got more creative with those during this process. And so we're doing a lot of our virtual PI planning sessions using those two tools. And some built-in macros to make it easier. And in those sessions, typically they would have been a lot of personal interactions and sticky notes. It just takes some more curating before and after the event, as Jason said. And I'll echo what Jason said. The PI planning session would have been over 1 or 2 days. Now with it being virtual and capture all of that material online, we're seeing higher quality outputs of the user stories that are coming out of those sessions. And so that's the part that I think will live on forever, and is the innovation that occurs now in the moment.
As Michael said, some of the tools that he mentioned, we're also using, but the other thing we're thinking about is, and doing, is building services into teams directly. So gone are the days where IT would say, we need to go solve another problem by adding yet another destination, whether that's a web-based app or a mobile app or whatever the case may be. That net result of a team that was, or a person that was in the enterprise, was they were pivoting to all these different applications to get things done. Instead, we now finally have the construct where the conversation can be a platform in and of itself. So you can put services directly into where teams are engaging so that they can get work done faster, having the content and information they need. So you can have bots work alongside people right there in the conversation thread, and deliver to our clients at a faster pace than, they need to go to this tool to get this piece done. They need to go to this. And if they remember all those tools, it would be a miracle. But now you sort of put them right where the team is acting. We never really had that opportunity before, where you could have collaboration alongside of work. And these platforms, the ones Michael mentioned, Slack, Microsoft Teams, et cetera, finally sort of bring all this stuff together, which means I think, there's a ton of promise, and there's, from a user experience perspective, there's a lot more optimism that we'll be able to solve this, way better than we have in the past.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps, Aaron.
Yeah, and that was, Aaron, I was going to hit on tools too in a little bit too. So I love that somebody was thinking very much in line with I was on some of these questions. And for my side of things, we use Trello, which is the like Jira Lite now that it's owned by Atlassian. And I spent some time even on that this weekend for our sake, for our team, trying to learn more about that. So I mean, from the tool basis, I know we hit on a little bit of that, but I want to kind of continue the conversation down the road of the virtual workforce for a second, in two routes. One, virtual internships, which I think could be a really interesting topic to discuss here, and two, virtual hiring. So we're obviously in a very odd state right now where we're coming up to summer. There would be a lot of internships over summer that may or may not be taking place. And then hiring from the standpoint of, well, if you're building projects, you're still having some churn, you're still having some need. So maybe a little bit of a cross conversation with you guys about what you're thinking about that. Are there any efforts going towards either right now? And just ideally, is there any magic bullet to maybe help somebody out here who's on this call or listening in later to say, hey, here's your solution if you're thinking about these two things?
I'll start real quick. Just on virtual hiring, that's something we've done for years. I mean, we've years ago started before it was super prevalent, we would ship out a webcam to people, and a lot of companies, have done this or have been doing things like this, where it's just not practical to bring, or you might not, to bring everyone into an office to do an in-person interview. The video interviews are much more prevalent. But I think the more challenging part, and maybe the new part, is a completely virtual internship process, right? That, we're certainly in a point where, companies are continuing to hire, and, if they've relied on video in the past, it's just more of the same. If they've not done that in the past, that's a pretty, quick thing to start to get used to. But the internship thing is a really challenging thing. And the reason and just for Accenture's sake, we are continuing to do virtual internships. We very much believe that, getting, potential employees that are coming out of college interested in to have them understand what Accenture does in a way that they can really sort of touch it, feel it, understand what it's like to work on a project at Accenture. We believe that's an absolutely important thing to continue. And so we'll do virtual internships. But imagine, the way that you got to think about this differently, the people that are going to oversee that internships experience, those people that are on the project that are going to take those people in, it now means that they've got to have a different way that they're giving them an overview of giving them the work, checking in on that work, answering questions, being available. When you've got someone in the office and you've assigned them for a period of time on an internship, it's much easier to sort of be right physically with them and make sure that they are doing what they need to do and they don't have any questions. They don't feel nervous asking you a question. Now, when you're completely virtual, you've got to make that employee have the same, maybe if even a better experience. Going back to what Michael was saying, I think people are finding new ways to do things that they couldn't in the past. So we're very much thinking through, hey, what are all the ways that we can effectively engage with an intern, make sure that they feel like they're getting a great experience and that they could walk away ultimately and say, I feel great about Accenture. I want to, even better, I want to tell my friends about Accenture. I had such a great experience. I got real work. I didn't, I wasn't being assigned busy work, but I got truly legitimate, meaningful, that I could say, was reflective of the work that I would do when I start there. It takes investment to do that right and, get going the right way. But I think it's very much what companies that are hiring and are going to continue to do internships. That's the way we're thinking about it. Michael, how about you?
In some respects, I think IT has always been sort of ripe for being able to do projects virtually. Just the nature of tech. One thing I worry about is there is a component of allowing the interns into the office, seeing how the office works, interacting with people. And I do worry a little bit that some of that will have a hard time translating to the virtual environment. So I think the projects will go well, and we're 100% committed as well. We're doing our internships virtually this year, and I think we will adapt as a society as to what that means. But my hope is that maybe the second half of the summer, or maybe in follow-up internships, we can get them back into the office so that they can see some of these other things that I think are really important, because there's nothing like that real world experience to put on your resume, right? That helps you get that first job once you graduate. So looking forward to it. It's always an exciting time in the office. The interns bring a lot of positive energy. I think we'll need a tool. This can't be IT without a tool. I think we need a hangout tool so the interns can interact with each other. Because a lot of times they were doing that in person. And so I think we're going to have to figure out ways for them to virtually hang out.
Yeah, as my graduating high school senior is going to start an internship that was going to be in person this year, this summer. When all this happened, she was super disappointed. And then I said, having come from a world where working this way is just the norm, I actually said to my daughter, you're actually getting an amazing opportunity to learn what it's truly going to be, even when we all go back to work, learning how to work this way versus going to an internship where you're going to learn how to work only the way that people, in that scenario work, which is in person, is not really, relevant, as much relevant anymore, going to the world we're headed towards, which is, I don't know if we're going to say we're going to move the pendulum completely, but if you hear leaders around the CEOs from the largest companies, they're saying we're headed to a place much more than we were in the past, where virtual is more the norm versus the exception. And so I think it's if you talk to your interns about that, hey, guess what? You're learning how to work in the new, and we're going to really put that to the test. I think is a neat opportunity. It's a neat way to sort of pitch that to them.
Oop, Joe's on mute.
Yeah, sorry. With your enterprises too, I'm assuming that the IT infrastructure, they're providing laptops, so they're providing computers to the interns. And is that different now that you're looking at virtual internships and in person? That there's some more security procedures or some more hardware procedures that have to be in place?
We've always offered that, and so I think a lot of that's just standard. So now, as Jason said, we'll be exercising in ways that we weren't in the past. And I agree with Jason. I think the world just got smaller because, as he said, the next generation, right, after all this, right, means that opportunities could come knocking from anywhere, right? And so I think that's an exciting place to live and work.
Gotcha. And I want to do a quick time check and then a call for questions here, and then I'm going to pose another one to you guys. So we got about 15 minutes left. For anybody who's on the Zoom call, if you want to pose a question, you can raise your hand, and I will take them in order as best as I can see as they come in. If you're on Facebook, just post a question in the chat. But talk about the physical side of all this for a second. Both FPL and Accenture both have physical offices in Florida. What is the actual physical footprint of your respective organizations in both offices and then in terms of people, with the understanding that now all of that is virtual and it probably will be for at least some time?
Yeah, so we, as I stated, Accenture has an office here in the Tampa Bay area. People are working remote now, and we'll be going through a process to globally to determine when it's safe for teams to start going back. But until then, we're working like we're working right now. We're working virtually, and those absolutely essential workers that have to be in the office for short periods of time, they're the only ones that have any exception to do that. But it is truly the exception. And what we're doing right now is the norm. That's the way we're doing it at the moment.
And for us being critical infrastructure, we're never closed. And so it just means that, some people can more easily do their jobs virtually than others. But with being critical, people need their lights, and that's a very important part of what we do, and air conditioning.
So one of the questions I had, and again, if anybody has a question, feel free to dump it in chat or raise your hand. There is a preference when we're talking about internships to have a lot of relationships with colleges and institutions. I know, Michael, you guys do a lot with FIU, FAU. Jason, I'm sure you guys also have some relationships, at least for your office in the Tampa Bay area. Is there a disconnect now because the universities are also all virtual that you're looking to overcome? And have you found any way to overcome that where you would otherwise try and have a little bit more in person, either, let's say, a career expo or guest speaking opportunity, something like that?
Yeah, I would connect this back to, what we were saying around, I think everyone has gotten more used to this approach, which means colleges and universities are already thinking about creative solutions for connecting their graduates, graduating seniors or graduates from advanced degrees with the workforce. And so whether they're hosting virtual job fairs or whether they're participating in encouraging their graduates to participate in the virtual work fairs, which I think, that Tampa Bay Tech has one coming up here in the next month. And I'm assuming you have something similar in South Florida. But I think, universities are actually helping with their populations who, many of them actually were finishing, their semester this way with their student populations, already thinking about how they can graduates with companies that are hiring. So I actually think it helps us with this problem statement because they're already directing their folks to ways to connect with employers.
I don't know that everyone has necessarily thought about their digital self, and I say in the context of, if everything has gone virtual, your first interview, your first internship, right? The need and there was always some joking around about social media and managing your social media when you're out looking for that first job. But I do think you have to create a professional digital self and make sure that you're ready for how do you interview, how do you interact with people. Jason, you talked about the virtual backgrounds. Whether you have a real background or virtual background, that says a lot about who you are. And I think that stuff is really important. And so my advice only is if we have people on listening from higher ed, right? Coaching people, teaching people, showing them some of those virtual tools would be really critical. And my guess is that will become part of the new norm this next semester.
Yeah, and I've been trying to think back about how I would have handled school virtually. I don't think I would have been able to cut it. It's a whole different perspective now. Garnered, I went to a school that had a beach right outside my dorm, so being off campus was already a wash. So we got two questions from the audience here. One again from Aaron, and then next up is Joe Sapp. So Aaron, if you want to go with your question, and then Joe, you'll ask yours right after Aaron.
Just was wondering both from the Accenture side and from the FPL with this COVID and pushing like that everything is remote. How much are companies being pushed to go fully digital, meaning cloud, SaaS? Because you guys might have a hybrid. I do understand FPL has big infrastructure. It wouldn't be easy to move from an SAP to the cloud in 5 minutes. But I'm saying, how much are you guys being pushed certain parts like marketing or HR to go fully digital, to have 100% SaaS implementations that, like if they have a NetSuite or any other system like that, they will be able to like log in, do the closing, do all the things transactionally with no impact, unless there's no internet, of course.
So I'll start. I know Michael has, in a regulated industry, has a challenging answer. I mean, a tougher circumstance. But in the three biggest things that Accenture is talking to our clients about right now is security, cloud, and collaboration, right? They're the hottest topics out there, and it's what our clients are asking for our help with. When it comes, because I see another question related to cybersecurity that I'll sort of touch on as well. For Accenture, with as large as we are, we're 97% in public cloud. So we run all of our services in the cloud with some very few exceptions where we've got stuff in our own data centers, but it's very, very minor. Most everything is in the cloud. With that stance, obviously there's a tremendous focus on security and keeping secure, both in sort of the technical sense, but also in behavior, employee behavior, as knowing the human is always the weakest link in cybersecurity. So we have a tremendous focus on our 500,000 people on training the right behaviors, a ton of what to look out for, not just in terms of phishing and those sorts of things, but also in just good behavior when you're on a home network and how you safely work from home and work with your clients that you might be connecting in their environment. So, hot topics, but very much on the top. I mean, this is a CEO level agenda thing with our clients now. This is not just like, hey, it's the IT shop that's saying, hey, we should, think about this or that. It's now on the top of mind of our CEOs, our client CEOs. They're asking for help in those three specific areas.
Yeah, I don't think that we differentiate between on-prem or cloud from a security standpoint. And I think that's the way you have to treat it, is that security comes first, right? And so in some respects, it should be invisible, where you're operating from. And as you said, getting people to operate in that manner. And I think it's funny because even my mother can spot mock phishing now, which I think is good. So the campaign to educate people definitely has a trickle-down effect to everyone we touch at home, which I think is interesting. But we definitely have a cloud first as well, and that puts a lot of pressure on getting those critical cloud skills when we're looking for people.
That said, Joe Sapp, he had a question mainly on cyber. If you want to put your audio and video on and go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Michael, Jason. Hi. That was a great segue. So you guys talk a lot. You guys have been talking a lot about the new tools that are out there. And a lot of times, especially at an FPL where you are such a highly regulated company, anytime you have new tools, there's very strict, processes that go through SecOps and so forth. How do you mitigate the fact that you have to get those tools up and running quickly and still maintain the same stringent processes that you would need to take?
As I said before, security has to come first. So while speed is important, you can't compromise security. And so part of what you do is you just have to get ahead of it. And so your ability to understand the landscape of the tools, develop the relationships with the right vendors that you know are secure, I think are critical. And some of the vendors are better than others. We've seen that in news headlines, quite recently and over time. And as I said, it's not even a question here with respect to how we treat security, that we will say no if we don't feel like the right security practices are not in place.
Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. So that said, we got about 5 more minutes to go here. And we, if anybody does have another question, feel free to throw it in there. But I'd love to ask you guys just a little kind of aside, but what's been the biggest win in the last 2 months that you guys have seen? I know that's kind of odd because we're in this time that we are, but I'm sure there's wins that you guys can gloat about here for a second, and I'm very interested to hear what 1 or 2 of them might be.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I'm not sure with COVID that Jason and I would have done this event today. I think part of these events that we're doing were because we went virtual, and so I think it's an opportunity to collaborate in different ways, even when it's with an old friend. And so I think that's really cool about some of the stuff that has occurred in the last 2 months.
Agreed. I echo that. The other thing, a couple other thoughts that just come to mind very quickly is right at the start of the call, we talked about ways to improve something that happens and has always happened with companies forever. There's meetings, and everyone has always known there's a more efficient way to get something done. Meetings kind of like the last step of that chain. And so it's really forced people, I've seen it now in our organization, it's forced people to sort of use meetings as the last resort instead of saying, oh, I can't solve it. Let's pull a meeting together. And, hopefully by the end of that 30 minutes or 60 minutes, we'll have solved world hunger and we can move on. No, think about the meeting as something that is at the end of the chain. When the chat team, the chat group that you started to say, what about this? Here's a recommendation. Who do we need to get involved? You can do that only when you get to the point you actually need to get on a call. And so it's had people think differently about, the reason for a meeting, but then also making meetings more efficient. So now I see more people saying right at the start of the call, what's the objective? If that's not already in the meeting invite with the agenda, people are now forcing to say, look, I don't want to be in back-to-back world today. What are we trying to solve today in this 30 minutes? Can we solve it in 4 minutes and beyond to the day? And then the other thing is, I think the creativity that's coming out, not just in collaboration, but as a whole, what's happening is business functions now without the luxury of just saying, oh, we'll get to it or we'll make that happen, longer term. They're finding ways to cut through red tape in short order. The legal team, the data privacy team, the InfoSec team, IT, HR, finance, they're all coming together and saying, how do we solve this problem? And magically, stuff that would have taken 6 months, a year, now is taking several days because you're getting everyone aligned to say, we need to solve it, and we don't have the luxury of time to do so. So I'm seeing what that's now, the benefit of that is people are realizing, oh, that long drawn out process that we have to deliberate on whatever, we don't really need most of those steps because we can, get to an answer more efficiently. So those are 2 quick things that come to mind for me that I'm seeing every day come to reality.
I definitely have seen less red tape. You're absolutely right, and things have been much faster. I think the other thing is, I think you're talking about meetings sort of being in control. I think it's given a higher quality life back to people when they're not in meetings. And so in some respects, maybe productivity went up a little bit because of that, because they know when they can plug in and when they can unplug from meetings. And I think that's sort of been a side benefit of all this as well.
And there's one last question that came from Eric, and I'm just going to read this off really quick for the sake of time. But with Q2 affected, obviously, what is your plan, or what are your game plans moving forward on projects? How are you looking forward, essentially, on the things that you have on your to-do list?
I'll start just, as we always do, but I think this current circumstance is getting us to, think about this even more, but it's always about prioritizing the most important things. And I think all companies are looking at their stack of in-flight projects and really saying, like, this thing that we had planned on doing, with this team over this duration of time, does it really, measure up to some of the more urgent pressing things? So there's always, going to be stuff that gets prioritized up the stack, and, replanning, as Michael said, you might be replanning some of your scrums to focus on much different things than you had originally anticipated, but you're still going to have a stack of stuff that's at the top of the heap. We're in that situation now. It means just a slightly, in some cases, large dramatic shifts of what we would have people working on, but that constantly happens. I think more so now we're just thinking about what are the absolute musts. There's not a whole lot of, like, nice to have programs that are sort of continuing these days. It's truly, as I mentioned, what can we move to the cloud? How do we improve our security stance? How do we improve collaboration, make it more seamless and frictionless? Like, those are the things that are, getting prioritized. And then maybe the fourth one is, how do we safely return people back to the office? Those are the sorts of things that are sort of moving up the stack.
Yeah.
And I think we've had even more work added to the plate. So it wasn't a stopping of projects. In some cases, it was adding more projects to the plate. And so, to the question about hiring, we continue to hire because we've got projects to get done.
Yeah. And on that too, I mean, I think this is just kind of an odd time because there is so much shifting in the economic of the world that we live in, for sure. And, I want to thank both of you guys for the work that you're putting in, because I know, Michael, I wouldn't be able to get electricity without you. And Jason, I know better than to ask all of the different things you're working on, but I know you're working on big things too. And I want to thank you guys for taking some time out of your day for sharing some thoughts. This call will be memorialized on both the Tampa Bay Tech and the Palm Beach Tech Facebook pages. So if you are watching and you want to go look back, you can find the recordings there. And if you guys are interested in all about learning more, you can reach out to either team. Both myself and then Jill, my colleague in Tampa, would gladly connect you with resources or any other information on these topics. Big thing I'm interested in, just to highlight, is virtual internships. I think that's going to be really important, not even after we look at it from here, but we look down the road months, years in advance about, that massive loss in talent development that our entire industry had. It's going to be a lot. So we're working on that and seeing what we can do with some of our partners. And I appreciate you guys doing everything that you're doing. So with that, I hope everybody has a good rest of your Monday and their week. Enjoy the cup of coffee today. I got a Pump House coffee from Jupiter, Florida. For those interested, check them out on Facebook. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again soon. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks for having us. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Thank you.